Tuesday, the 1st of September, and it's just gone 9 o'clock. Welcome to the meeting of the Standing Committee on Social Development. My name is Gillian Bosman, and I will be chairing this meeting. Just a reminder to all colleagues of the cardinal rules of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament and online conferencing. We expect all participants to be muted as they participate in the meeting. Only unmute yourself when you are required to speak, and you're welcome to use the video function as well. The chat function can be used for points of...
Good morning, Chairperson Wendy Philander, member of this committee.
Good morning, Chairperson Ricardo Mackenzie, member of the committee.
Good morning, Chairperson. Ayanda Barnes.
Good morning, member of this committee. Thank you.
Do we have any other members that need to introduce themselves?
Good morning to the committee, member Makamba Boja and member of this committee. Thank you.
Any other members that need to introduce themselves?
Good morning, Chairperson. Member Gillian from the Nclp.
A very warm welcome, Member Gillian. I also would like to say good morning to our procedural officer, Ms. Nomonde Jamtre. Nomonde, welcome and thank you for your work in putting this together. And good morning to all of the staff from our procedural team, as well as our IT team, and then our colleagues from the different departments. Before we ask the officials from the different departments to introduce themselves, Nomonde, do we have any apologies?
Morning, Chair, and morning, members. No apologies received, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to officials from the Provincial Department of Social Development to introduce themselves, and then to officials from the National Department of Social Development.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and members. This is Mzwandi Leu from the Provincial Department of Social Development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Hill.
Good morning, Chairperson. Lionel Arnold from the Provincial Department of Social Development. Thank you.
Do we have any colleagues from the National Social Development online with us yet?
Good morning, sir. I'm Antoinette Brink from National Department of Social Development.
Welcome, Ms. Brink. Anybody else joining you?
Good morning, Chair. It's Brenton van Friede from the National Department of Social Development. I would also just like to pass an apology for our DG. He's not going to be able to join us today. Given we're trying to do all 9 provincial hearings in 1 week, and we just couldn't fit everything into his schedule. So he might pop in a bit later, but he's unable to join us immediately. I'll hand over to I think we have 2 other colleagues who can introduce themselves as well.
Good morning, Chairperson. Trevor John, Department of Social Development. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Anthony Mapiramiti from the Department of Social Development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and a very warm welcome to all of you. Members, the purpose of today's meeting is for this committee to receive a briefing by the Department of National Development Social Amendment Bill, that's the 8B of 2018. And I'm going to hand straight over to our Nclp delegate to make opening remarks. Member Gillian, I'm handing over to you.
Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning, members. The bill on, the foster care Systems and the Social Assistance Amendment Bill was referred to the Nclp on the 9th of June 2020 from the National Assembly. This process is a 6-week cycle. We had a briefing last week on the process, and then Gauteng Province and the Western Cape Province asked that we do yours today. So that's why I'm in this meeting. The public hearings is a 2-week cycle that needs to start within the provinces after we did the introduction into the provincial legislatures from the 7th to the 18th of September. And then the negotiating mandates meeting will happen on the 22nd of September after we receive the mandates from the provincial legislatures. And then the final mandates meeting for the Nclp committee will happen on the 29th of September, where we must then conclude the bill. Now, Chairperson, the department will take us through, and as all members are aware, we are busy with this bill for a very, very long time. And we also need to report, the department also need to report to us as the Nclp and the National Assembly committees how far they have been for this period. And all of us are aware that due to COVID-19, there was a delay in the process, but we are trying to do our bit. And with your indulgence and your cooperation, we wish to finish this bill, which is so important to assist us and to also bring the backlog on the foster care assistance, which narrow that gap. So from our side in the Nclp, we just want to wish you well, Chairperson, and your committee. And we are really looking forward to finish and finalize this bill so that we can give better assistance to foster care parents in the country. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gillian, and thank you very much for that introduction. Members, I'm now going to move straight into the presentation by the department. I'm not sure whom from the department is going to make that presentation, but I'll hand over to our colleagues from the Department of Social Development, and you can share your screen as well if you're able to.
Thank you, Chairperson. Once again, good morning, Chair and members. It's Brenton van Friede from the Department of Social Development, and I'll take you through the presentation. If I can maybe just get a confirmation that the presentation is showing.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Okay, so as the member, the Chairperson of the Nclp mentioned, this bill has been coming on for a while. It was introduced to Parliament in April 2018. Unfortunately, due to the change in administration, it lapsed in 2019 and was then revived in October 2019. And then picked up by the Portfolio Committee on Social Development in November 2019. The committee then had a range of public hearings and also had written submissions for the bill. The public hearings happened in February 2020, and all the comments, or the vast majority of the comments from the written submissions as well as the public hearings were largely supportive of the amendments in the bill. The committee approved the bill in March 2020, and subsequently it went then to the National Assembly, where it was passed at the National Assembly in June 2020, and submitted to the Nclp for concurrence. And the bill was heard then it was presented to the Nclp last week on the 25th of August. So in terms of this bill, there's three main objectives and a couple of smaller, just incidental things like cleaning up definitions and so forth. But in terms of the main objectives of the bill, the first one is to empower the minister with the concurrence of the Minister of Finance to make additional amounts payable to social grants. And this achieves two main things. Largely, first of all, is to regularize the practice that we currently have in place. As many of the members may know, that we pay an old age grant to older persons that qualify, and then to older persons over the age of 75, we pay an additional 20 rands. Now, apparently this was, when we implemented this, it was ultra vires. The minister didn't necessarily have the powers to do that. So first of all, we want to correct that practice that empowers so as to empower the minister to actually then make these additional payments of extra amounts on top of grants. By doing that, we also then give her the ability to implement what we call the extended child support grant policy. Now, this is a policy that was approved in Cabinet in 2016, and to a large extent will address the foster care crisis that we currently have. And I'll speak a little bit more about this policy in a few slides, in the next few slides. The other objective is to enable us to pay a CSG to the child head. So the current anomaly we have in the bill is that if a child is in a child-headed household, in other words, the head of the household is also, that child head can't get the CSG on behalf of themselves because they're the caregiver, but they can only get it for the children. And so it's a small amendment just to enable that the child can also get the grant, that the head of the household can also get the grant if they're still a child. In other words, if they're still between the ages of 16 and 18. We also then the other objective of the bill is to remove the reconsideration mechanism and thereby shorten the appeals process. And the last one is just a simple change in the organizational form of the Inspectorate to change it from a government department to a government component. And I'll speak a bit more about that later as well. In terms of the extended child support grant policy, that we want to implement when we make the amendment of this bill. It is largely to address the foster care crisis and the current, as you know, we also have an instruction from the Pretoria High Court to implement a comprehensive legal solution to the foster care crisis that we have. So as you know, South Africa is faced with an increasing number of orphans. The vast majority of these orphans are actually in safe and secure environments, usually with their grandparents or other family members. However, due to the high levels of poverty in the country, the foster care grant has become the default grant over the child support grant. And so with some families taking care of orphans, they have managed to navigate the foster care system. So we have about 1 million orphans, and about 500,000 of the families where these orphans reside have managed to navigate the foster care system, noting that to be placed in foster care, you need to have an extensive welfare service support together with the court systems for the placement. And this is a long and cumbersome process to get placed into foster care. So the vast majority of orphans end up on the child support grant anyway, with a few managing to get into the foster care. What this also does then, it creates it creates an overdemand on the limited resources we have for foster care and clogs up the foster care system. And so essentially what we want to do is we want to then say, instead of having orphans who are in safe family relationship or care relationships, for example, an orphan with a granny, an aunt, or an uncle, that those orphans should just necessarily, we provide them with a top-up on the child support grant, and the policy at the moment recommends a 50% top-up to the child support grant for those orphans, and in that way they don't necessarily have to go through the foster care system, and that should bring substantial relief on the foster care system for processing foster care orders. What will then happen is they will just apply for the normal CSG, get the top-up CSG, and SASSA will then give a referral to the provincial departments so that they're also then aware that these are children that are orphan children that are living with family members, and normal social services can still be provided to them, but at the pace that the different provinces are capable at handling. And we expect that this will bring a huge relief to the foster care system. We expect the numbers within the foster care system, and we're already seeing those numbers come down, but they used to be as high as about 550,000 foster care children, or at least foster care grants that we're paying. Those numbers should technically go up to about 1 million, but if we remove the orphans, they will come all the way down to about 50 to 60,000. And we'll find another, and then this process provides us with an alternative mechanism for dealing specifically with orphans, and thereby freeing up the foster care system for the more serious cases of child abuse and so forth, where you need child protection services. Okay, so I think I spoke to the slide already. As I mentioned, Cabinet approved this policy in December 2016. In terms of financing, the Treasury is also very keen to finance this. In fact, they've already allocated money in the 2019 MTF to this. However, because the bill was not processed in time, we couldn't implement this. It will cost roughly about R1 billion to implement this policy, which is less than 1% of our 100, and it's like 0.5% of our 180 billion rand budget. The policy was also widely consulted by civil society, as well as all the sort of social welfare organizations within each of the provinces, and has received quite a lot of support we've received quite a lot of support for this. And in fact, the fact that we were so slow in a sense in implementing it, one of the civil society organizations actually then took us to court and got a court order for us to implement this sort of legal an adjustment to the legislative framework to bring about the relief we need on the foster care system. So in terms of this amendment, the amendment is quite small as it basically just then empowers the minister to make these additional amounts payable on the existing social grants, and then to publish regulations around qualifying criteria and the additional amounts in line with the way the Act is currently structured. Then the second big amendment objective of the bill is to remove the reconsideration mechanism within the appeals process. So currently, what we have, if a person applies for a social grant and the person is rejected, before they can lodge an appeal with the Appeals Tribunal, which is an organization that was set up in around 2008, they first need to go back to SASSA and ask SASSA to reconsider their application. This was sort of a quality control measure that was built in at the time. I think it was around about 2008, but we've now find that this measure has become redundant in that SASSA has actually in their normal application process built in large numbers of quality control measures, and a lot of it is also system driven. So the chances of making a mistake is very, very minimal at SASSA. And as a result, all that this reconsideration does is delay the applicant's chance to appeal. It also creates a situation where SASSA is being both referee and player. And so the suggestion here is then that this whole process of reconsideration be removed. And once the applicant's application is rejected, the applicant can then move straight on to lodging an appeal with the Appeals Tribunal. So instead of asking SASSA to reconsider their grant, giving SASSA 90 days to do that, we're cutting out this potential process, because the appeals process is also 90 days. What we're doing now is we're cutting out, or we're reducing this 180-day period to a 90-day period, and streamlining the appeals process in a sense. And then the last one is the Inspectorate for Social Assistance. Now, Section 24 of the Social Assistance Act was passed by both the Nclp and the National Assembly way back in 2004. but it was never promulgated or signed in by the president for two reasons. There were two entities established in the bill. One was the Appeals Tribunal, one was the Inspectorate, and the department didn't have the resources to implement both at the time. So the department chose the Appeals Tribunal first, and we've established the Appeals Tribunal. It's a very effective organization. In fact, we've won international awards for that organization. But we haven't yet established the Inspectorate. We're now ready to establish the Inspectorate or to implement the Inspectorate. We've got some tentative startup funding for it. We've got a business case. Everything is approved. We've got an incubation structure running in the department. However, there's one small challenge. In the legislation, the Inspectorate is deemed to be a government department, and the last thing we want is another government department at the national level. So we've been asked to change that to a government component of the Department of Social Development. And so the amendment in the bill is really quite a small amendment, but critical for the establishment of the Inspectorate, and that's simply changing the organizational form from a government department to a government component. As mentioned, this bill was considered by the National Assembly and passed and transmitted to the Nclp for concurrence. This primarily being because the bill is classified as a Section 76 bill. And just the final comment then, when the Nclp considered this, they also made the recommendation that in addition to the amendments in this bill, that when the minister appoints the independent members of the Appeals Tribunal, that she also then does this in consultation with Parliament. So that is an additional amendment that the Portfolio Committee of Social Development made, and was part of the bill that was then passed by the National Assembly. So in conclusion, Chairperson, it is then we're recommending that the provincial legislature notes the amendments and makes comments, but hopefully that you will provide a mandate then to the Nclp to support the National Assembly's decision to pass the Social Assistance Amendment Bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm just now going to give an opportunity for our colleagues from the Provincial Department of Social Development. Is there anything that any official from our provincial department would like to add to the presentation or to comment on the provincial impact of the bill?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just to indicate that this is a welcome development, that there are going to be these amendments, particularly when it comes to making provision for child-headed households to be able to collect the grant. This has been something that has been troubling all of us, and with the legislation allowing its implementation, I think that will be a welcome relief for the province. And for many families who could not afford to assist these children because of loss of lack of income, now that the child that has been declared as the head of the household is able to claim the grant and feed the family and other children, that is a welcome development. It will make a great impact in reducing the level of deprivation in many communities and indeed in many households. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hehu. Members, I'm now going to give over to you for questions. If you could perhaps indicate by raising your hand if you've got any questions. Or if you don't have that function, you can just let me know. I see Member Barnes, Member Baku Force, and then Member Makamba Bocha in that order. If I could just ask the presenter to just remove the presentation from the screen, if you could just stop sharing your screen, and then Member Barnes will go straight into you.
Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity. And also thank you very much to the Nclp to come and present to us today. I want to join hands with the Provincial Department by welcoming the presentation. Indeed, one must acknowledge by saying what was a highlight for me in the entire presentation on this bill was the matter where one can at least appeal now directly to the tribunal. It cuts lots of red tape. And whereas we know that social development is a very critical part within our society of today and a very reliable one that communities are relying on. So to see red tape being cut at this department, it's a big welcome and support from my side. I thank you very much on that note, Chair.
Thank you. Member Baku Force.
Thank you, Chair. Before I waste any time, as the ANC, we welcome the presentation. It is very informative, and we have noted the contents and are in full support of, especially the paying additional amount of older persons grant and extended child support grant. And as the ANC, we are in full support of proposed amendment and wish to call on all members to do the same. I would like to understand what caused the delays in the process of passing the bill between April 2018 to date. It was in slide 2, that one, and in slide 3 to 10, and I mean slide 3 and 10, you know, the establishment of Inspectorate for Social Assistance is a necessary measure. What will be its powers and functions? How will we ensure its independence? What are the details of the business course? Can you give us a draft? Where will the component be placed in the organogram? Will it have branches in provinces? Will the Inspectorate also deal with other challenges such as the current SASSA challenges? In slide 11, Chair, I would like to know what will be the opposition of the Tribunal. How will it function in provinces? What will be the powers and function? I think that's my last question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Baku Force. Member Makamba Pocha, and then Member Mackenzie.
Chairperson, thank you very much, and thanks to the presenter for the presentation. And as EFF, we also welcome the presentation and the amendments thereof. I just want to make a comment, kind of a question on the objective of the bill, that they are talking about shortening the appeals process, of which he has actually explained what was the issue before in terms of the timelines and all that. I just want to know, were there any other bottlenecks in that process other than the timelines attached with the process? And secondly, I just want to know whether the department has any process in place to curb the corruption that comes with the whole process, especially with the social development. So I just want the department to highlight us on that particular aspect, even though it's not on the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to get more details on the independent tribunal. And then under clause number 7, just hang on a second, I think my note here. Provision is made for the independent tribunal, then it talks about qualified persons. What in their mind would constitute a qualified person? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we'll stop there for now. We'll give the department an
opportunity. Chairperson, apologies. The words they use, appropriately qualified persons. So what would constitute an appropriately qualified person? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, we're going to hand over to the department. But just in terms of outlining the process, and I'm just listening to one of the comments made by Member Baku Force, we're only starting this process now. So we don't have to express the opinion of the committee just yet, and I'm grateful that Member Baku Force is eager to support, but we still need to have public hearings and engage with stakeholders within the province. So I'm now going to hand over to the department just to answer those questions, and then we'll open up for more questions or follow-up questions or even new questions. Mr. Van Vrede, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm going to respond to some of them, and then I'm going to ask my colleague Advocate Brink, who's the head of the Secretariat for the Appeals Tribunal, I think most of the questions were related to the Appeals Tribunal. I think in terms, and then there's also our colleague from the Inspectorate will answer the questions related to the Inspectorate. In terms of the only other question I think was around the delays. I think it was really just administrative matters due to noting the end of one administration and then the new administration coming in. So we tabled a bill just towards the end of that administration in 2018. I think from the department side, we thought there would just be a smooth transition over to the next administration, but there were some glitches that required that, you know, when things lapse, when one administration concludes, everything lapses, and there was a little bit of confusion around how all of that happened. So it required us, through the leader of government business, to revive the process again. And unfortunately, that did cause a little bit of delay. And then maybe Advocate Brink can come in to give us further details on how the appeals process works, the appointment of independent members, what is considered appropriate qualifications. However, noting that the Appeals Tribunal is a function within the department that has been running since around about 2008. Advocate Brink.
Thank you, Mr. Van Vrede, and thank you, Honourable Bosman and colleagues and honourable members. With reference to the independent tribunal, the function of the independent tribunal is, as Mr. Van Vrede indicated, to adjudicate appeals relating to social grant applications as well as social grant reviews that's being made by SASSA. And the whole purpose of this amendment is to do away with the internal reconsideration mechanism, as Mr. Van Vrede indicated, because currently what SASSA is doing is a mere administrative review. So, for instance, they will check whether a medical assessment in the case of a disability grant, whether the medical assessment is still within the 3 months period, but they will not go and look at the merit and consider the medical assessment per se. And that is where the independent tribunal will come in, or is coming in currently. Currently, our panel members are appointed in terms of the Social Assistance Act by the Minister, following an advertisement process where we advertise in all the major newspapers. For the past 3 years, we are actually, the adjudication function is more sorted or resolved specifically within the national office in Pretoria, although we receive appeals from all over the country. We've got currently 3 provincial offices, which is informed by the number of appeals received. The one is specifically in KZN, the other one in Eastern Cape, and the other one in Gauteng. Whereas the other provinces have dedicated provincial coordinators that frequently visit the provinces and the regions, the SASSA local offices, and actually assist them to lodge appeals, do awareness raising, and to sort out any challenges. One of the honourable members asked the questions about bottlenecks. Previously, it was the backlog that created a quite significant backlog. In 2012, we were able to sort out that, and we adjudicated and finalized over 60,000 appeals up until 2012. And from there on, the major bottleneck was the availability of critical records timelessly provided by SASSA, and we've managed with the assistance of SASSA to really sort that out as well. So our current overturn rate of adjudication is that we adjudicate more than 95% of appeals that we received within the 90-day period of receipt thereof as the tribunal. Our current tribunal consists of legally qualified panel members as well as medical practitioners. The regulations we are currently being managed by the Social Assistance Regulations, which was issued in 2011, which also makes provision for the appointment of members of civil society to assist in the case of social relief of distress appeals. But those appeals are very limited as it requires social work reports. And also the number of applications for that is very limited. The appropriately qualified is currently determined in terms of the regulations, which will be then also revised following this Amendment Act. But there will not be specific revisements in relation hereto, but it's a legal practitioner who must at least be an admitted advocate, attorney, or person with experience in the administration of law, and we require at least 5 years post-qualification experience. And then, of course, the fact that the person must be fit and proper, and that they must actually also not have any conflict of interest, and they must also not be in the full-time or part-time employment of the agency, which is SASSA. And then for the medical practitioner, it's the same. It needs to be 5 years post-qualification experience as a medical practitioner, and also the person needs to be registered at the Health Council, and then also fit and proper person. That is more or less with reference to the requirements in relation to the appointments of these panel members. And with following the amendment process, what we will do is that the minister will, once we've gone through the selection process, we will actually table a list of the recommended candidates together with their CVs and all the experience summarized for Parliament, so that they can actually have an independent look. I need to say that it's important to note that as the department, we only provide the administrative and secretarial support to these independent tribunal panel members, because all these people are people that's properly qualified and that is appointed.
Hi, Baku, how are you?
Sorry?
I can't complain, my
Excuse me,
dear.
Member Baku Force. Member Baku Force. Please mute yourself.
Thank you, sir. So, thank you, sir. So in relation to that is where our panel members are currently appointed as, and that we will follow that process once the Act is amended. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. I see Member Philander.
Chairperson, good morning. Thank you, Chair. Chair, as mentioned, it is important for me to seek clarity, Chairperson, as we're at the later stage will have to express an informed view. Chairperson, clause 4, with the mention made of the prescription of additional payments that is linked to social grants, the nature and the circumstances under which such payments will become payable, and also, Chairperson, the right that is afforded to the minister to differentiate on the basis of need when these grant beneficiaries, whether they qualify or not, Chairperson. I would like to get a better understanding as to what is meant in clause 4. Also, in clause 5, Chairperson, making mention of the social relief of distress. Now, Chairperson, we have seen the situation during this pandemic, and I think what we write into law should also be considerate of lessons learned during this time. And if the National Department can also just give an overview as to what thought has gone into clause 5. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Are there any other members with any questions for this round? Member Philander. Any other members with questions? I don't see any. I see Member Makamba Bocha.
Chairperson, it's not a question. I just want to do a follow-up. I had a question. The last question that I had, it was on the issue of what process does the department have to curb corruption that will probably be in fact during this process and everything else. So I've not received any response on that particular question, Chairperson.
Okay, so the question around what mechanisms have been put in place to curb corruption before it happens. Any other member with a question for this round? Okay, I'll hand over to the department.
Thanks, Chairperson. My apologies. After Advocate Brink, I was hoping Advocate Kumalo would come in to speak about the Inspectorate to answer as the Honourable Member mentioned, there were a few questions on the Inspectorate. So maybe he can start before we move on to the new questions, just to conclude from the previous round. Advocate Kumalo, if you can explain the thinking about the establishment of the Inspectorate. Largely the Inspectorate is being established to deal with issues around fraud. Jabulani.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the members. There was a question that was asked about the independence of the Inspectorate. And if you look at the Social Assistance Act, I think it's section 24, subsection 4, it guarantees the independence from both SASSA and the Department of Social Development. And hence we're pushing for it to be a separate government component. That section guarantees those. And if you go further down with regards to the functions, somebody asked what is it that we're going to be doing. Section 27 outlines everything that the Inspectorate will be doing. And I'll just mention a few of those things, and which are mainly the conducting financial and compliance audits, investigations of corruption and fraud and theft, and also the combating of social assistance abuse. Those are mainly going to be the responsibilities of the Inspectorate. And the other question that was asked was with regards to the location. As a start, the location will be in Pretoria, and we'll go to provinces on a project basis, and maybe later on we will have our provincial offices. That has not been decided as yet. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Chair. If I can then answer the two new questions. Let me start with the social relief. So for the amendment for the social relief is actually just a small one, and it's based on learning from not so much from the COVID. Obviously, the time this bill was in Parliament, the COVID interventions have already sort of came upon us after this bill was already in Parliament. But the reason for this amendment was basically our experience with the distribution of social relief in the events of disasters. Because social relief was always individual based, it limited us from working with non-governmentals and NPOs and being able to provide broader relief measures to communities as a whole. And hence we made that change just to add in the ability to provide social relief in the event of disasters to communities and so forth. I think the current sort of the experiences we have learned from the COVID interventions or the impacts of COVID are largely our responses were individually based. So our existing SRT was capable of handling that. However, there are a whole new set of advances we've made in the use of technology, which not only applies to the SRD, but we're hoping to incorporate that throughout our entire grant processes, using these electronic processes, database checking, and so forth. And so we do hope to take that learning and incorporate that as well. And we are busy working on a set of legislative amendments to facilitate that. In terms of the prescription of additional payments, as that's one of the key objectives of this bill. So as mentioned before, the minister has done this in the past. For example, and an example I used was the old age grant where an additional amount of 20 Rand was payable on top of the existing old age grants for those over the age of 75. But however, that when we wanted to do the same for the child support grant, we were given a legal opinion that the Principal Act needs to be amended first to empower the minister to do that. And so this amendment is largely also to facilitate that additional payment on top of the child support grant or that extended child support policy that I presented during the presentation, where we would like to make an additional top up on the child support grant specifically for orphans and specifically for orphans living with family members. This also then needs to be done in consultation and with the concurrence of the Minister of Finance because it has financial implications. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. van Vrede. Members, are there any other questions of clarity or questions that you have before we release the department? Yes, Member Philander.
Chairperson, perhaps just for my knowledge, in terms of reconsideration and appeals process, what is the timelines attached to that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. van Vrede.
Thanks, Chair. So for reconsideration, it's a 90-day period for SASSA to reconsider a grant. And then only after that 90-day period has lapsed can the applicant go to or if SASSA does it obviously before the 90 days and informs the applicant, then the applicant can go to the appeals tribunal, which is also a 90-day period for them, which they must then consider the appeal within a 90-day period. The proposal here is to remove the first 90-day period by doing away with the reconsideration and thereby reducing this total 180-day period to 90 days.
Thank you very much. Members, I'm going to give you a last bite of the cherry. Would anyone else like to pose a question or ask a follow-up? No? Okay. Thank you very much to our colleague. Yes, Makamba Pocha?
Sorry, my hand delayed. I just want to find out from the department, seeing that they have cut the appeals process, and now the process will no longer go through the SASSA department and all that. Now it's going to go through the tribunal process. What is the time frame for that specific process now that they've cut the 180 days with the SASSA department? Thank you.
Chair, if I may answer.
Yes, you may.
The process will still be, so the appeals process was 90 days after the reconsideration process. So the appeals process will still be 90 days. We're not extending that. We still expect the tribunal to be able to adjudicate the appeals within 90 days.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Members, with that, I want to say thank you very much to our colleagues from the Department of Social Development for the presentation. Thank you very much for making yourselves available, and we wish you luck with all of the other briefings that you have. I'm going to ask that you're welcome to exit the meeting if you'd like, but I'm going to ask our committee members, our Nclp delegate, and the officials from the WCPP to stay behind. Mr. Heo and your team, if you'd like to get back to work as well, you're welcome to do that. And we're going to be discussing the process going forward.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Members, as indicated earlier by Member Gillian, the Nclp process is a 6-week cycle. And what we now need to do is to discuss the public participation process that we're going to take to make sure that the interest of the Western Cape is incorporated in our discussions and our decision. So we must now determine how we will conduct public participation on the bill. And then only after the public participation process has been completed, we will then have to give a negotiating mandate to the Nclp. and that will be to indicate whether we support the bill or whether we do not support the bill, and we can also propose amendments during that time. Can I ask if there are any comments from the members at this stage?
No, I think Chairperson will take your lead on the way forward.
So one of the questions we need to answer this morning, members, is whether we're going to how many public hearings we're going to have. So the public hearings can either happen the week of the 7th to the 11th of September, which is next week, or the week of the 14th to the 18th of September. So are members happy with us doing it the week of the 14th to the 18th of September?
Chairperson, I'm happy with that date. Agree.
And then in that case, how many public hearings do you think we should have? Should we aim for 2 or just 1?
2 will do, Chairperson.
2 is fine.
Yeah, 2 is fine.
So, Nomonde, are you happy with us scheduling 2 public hearings the week of the 14th to the 18th of September 2020?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy.
Or
But
Nomonde,
is it going to be the virtual public hearings, or members are going to go out?
members, with your approval, are you happy for us to have these public hearings virtually? I'm going to take the silence as a yes. Members are happy to have it virtually. It's going to take, it's going to take quite a lot of organization if we have to go out.
Yeah,
Yeban,
fine, Chairperson.
Yeban, Aniva, good. Phandle.
We don't have translation yet, Member Bako Force. Do you want to maybe enlighten us in English?
Asenin Betty, they know I already defeated. I wanted to say, let's meet in Parliament. But
No,
I already defeated.
I was asking whether we should go out and engage with communities. So not
Let's
Parliament.
go there to the community.
We can
That
go,
will
we can
help
go
us
out,
a lot.
Bossman.
Yes, let's go there to the community.
But members, remember, we don't have any time to organize anything.
How are we going to organize with the community virtual meeting?
So what we will do is members can now suggest a list of stakeholders that we should engage. We can then invite those stakeholders to submit their comments, and we can do that via WhatsApp and email. And then we can also invite those stakeholders to our virtual meetings. We had a very successful engagement in the Petitions Committee on Friday, where we used the Cape Access Centre to get members of the public involved as well.
Yeah.
Can I also ask then that you send out the bill to those different stakeholders, Chair?
Member
Before
Barnes?
the
Yes, Member Van Vogel, Member Barnes?
Thank you, Chair. My hand has been up. I wanted to make a suggestion, Chair, if the meeting would allow me to. If we perhaps have one virtual and one physical, I understand that maybe with the physical one, it will be very tedious and constrained, but at least let's try and involve physical. I know the planning will take time, but my suggestion would be let's have one virtual and one physical, since we are going to have 2. I'm not sure if the meeting would agree with me. I think it will just be sufficient if we do it in that order. Thank you, Chair.
Member Philander?
Chairperson, I support the proposal that we do the public engagement virtually, Chairperson. I think we run the risk of having one in person and one virtually, that some stakeholders may feel, why us virtual and why us in person? So I do support the virtual engagement at this point, Chairperson.
Chairperson, can I come in?
Yes, Member Gillian.
Thank you, Chairperson. I've listened out to the proposals. Maybe if I can just ask if the provincial legislature has the function of hybrid meetings where you have a group of people maybe within the legislature, within the rules of lockdown, less than 50, and then the others can then sign in virtually. I think that is a much easier process that we also are using in the National Assembly if we want to do things like that. Because if we look into, not everybody is fortunate to be linked on virtual. So it will also give more substance to the process, that people who can't afford data or things like that can then become, because I think we've got enough time if we're doing it on the 14th and the 18th, that we maybe do one in a hybrid and the other one virtually, which means then people can be brought into the legislature who won't be able to be linked on a virtual platform, and then in the legislature and a virtual, that is how we do it in the National Assembly. If everybody can't be in the chambers, or everybody can't be on virtual, if maybe we can look into that form also. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, can I propose that myself and Nomonde engage with the Programming Authority to identify the 2 dates within which we're going to have the public hearings? What we will then do, and I would appreciate if members could, by the end of today, submit any specific interest groups or stakeholders that they think would be, that we should include. We will also then, once those dates have been agreed, we will communicate with all of these stakeholders that are already on our database, and we will ask them if they would like to be part of those public hearings, and we will then take their temperature to see whether they are comfortable with a virtual meeting or with a physical meeting. And based on the interest that we get from those groups, we'll be able to determine whether we should schedule something in person, or whether we should have one virtual and one physical or hybrid. I should also remind members that we do have access to technology at the different municipalities, as well as at the Cape Access Centre, so we can include people, because what we must be mindful of is a lot of the stakeholders won't want to travel all the way to Cape Town. Normally, we would have gone out to them under normal circumstances. So if you'll allow members, the proposal is that myself and the procedural officer identify the dates between the 14th and the 18th in concurrence with the programming authority. We will also then have to take the proposal of whether we meet face-to-face to the programming authority for their agreement as well. What we will do, members, is we will ask the WCPP Public Education and Outreach section to assist us in inviting and informing the public about the hearings. And they will, Mr. Kwesa and his team in the Public Education and Outreach Department will then help us to also make sure that members of the public are informed about this. Members, what we also need to agree to today, and what I need your permission to do, is to advertise these public hearings in the newspapers in the province. So are you happy with us advertising this once we've got the dates confirmed in the 3 official languages of the province?
Yes, Chairperson, that's perfect.
Agree to, Chairperson.
And again, just for supply chain management, we'll have to decide what those newspapers are. So can we agree that it will be a Xhosa speaking newspaper, one regional newspaper, and an English newspaper?
That's perfect.
Yes.
Nomonde, do you need us to name the newspapers now like we did the last time, or can we just look at the newspapers we used the last time for
The members can name, Chair, or we can use the ones that we used last time.
So I'm
Chair,
happy with.
If only we can include all regions, please, Chair.
What we will do, Member Barnes, is we'll look for the regional newspaper with the most reach. And I think the last time we used a newspaper in the Southern Cape, I think it was the George Herald. I'm not sure. But we'll also make sure that it goes out to all municipalities and all community newspapers. And we will ask the WCPP and the municipalities to use their social media platforms as well to advertise it. Members, and then as we try to gauge interest from community members, it might be useful if we do decide to do a face-to-face public hearing, that we do not do that inside Parliament, but that we do that outside of the metro. Because chances are it's going to be people from our rural constituencies that are going to
Chairperson.
Yes.
So Nomonde and I will identify, once we've gauged some interest from our stakeholders, whether which area, and we'll write to the committee just to let you know. But if you have any organizations or individuals that you think we should contact, please make sure that Nomonde gets that before the end of today. So that means, member, that our resolution is that we will have the public hearings between the week of the 14th and the 18th of September. And the committee will, by the end of today, advise on the stakeholders and communities that needs to be invited to the public hearings. We're going to engage the WCPP Public Education and Outreach section to ensure that they assist us in advertising this meeting to the public. We're also going to advertise this in the 3 major languages of the province, and we're going to use the newspapers that we used for our last advertisement, which was for the repeals bill, and that we, between myself and Nomonde, will identify the 2 dates, and will identify the format that those meetings will take place, depending on what type of public interest we get, because we might not get that much public interest as well. Nomonde, is there anything that I'm missing?
No, Chair, you have covered everything.
Members, any final thoughts or comments?
Nothing, Chairperson. We'll wait for your confirmation of the public hearings. And thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for the meeting.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you very much to our special delegate from the Nclp, Member Gillian, for joining us today and for leading the briefing as well. Members, the meeting is then adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. Bye. Cheers, colleagues.
Bye, colleagues.